when one pump doesn't really do it, then there's a possibility of actually adding multiple pumps together, okay? And we're going to take a look at multiple pump systems here in this particular lab. Now, this lab, there's going to be two of them. There's going to be pumps in series. That means that it's going to go into the one, and then from the one over here, it's going to go into a second one, and then ultimately go to the output. And then we're going to do one, and we're going to do it in parallel to where both of them are going to have a feed, and then both of them are going to have the same feed, okay, going into the actual output. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Now, as I set you down here and I'm adjusting the camera a little bit, I'm going to try to make this reasonably decent. We're going to put this down. Okay, so we're going to notice here that I've moved this pump back a little bit, and now I'm actually going to have to start doing a little bit of disconnecting, right? So I've already gone and done my first one. I figured out what that all looks like. This is generally how that's hooked up, but now I'm going to have to tear some things down. So what does it all look like? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that all your valves are turned off so that water isn't flowing where you don't want it to flow. And then you're going to have to take a very good look at this diagram and then figure out where parts are actually going to go. And it looks like all of this stuff is going to have to move. So again, I'm shutting all my valves down here so I don't lose too much water. I am going to lose a little bit of prime, but it's not really the end of the world. We can reprime this and we have space for the water. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to hold on to my parts and I'm going to try to, crack that loose right there. And I don't want to go all the way out. I'm just going to go gently, and you'll start to see water trickling out of the bottom here. Now, this right here can drain down into a pan that ultimately drains down into the bottom. That's a perfect situation. That's what we want. But if it's too much at one time, then what ends up happening is we end up having some leakage on there. So I'm going to move this one over. I want to make sure that my O-ring is in place here, and I'm going to try to quickly move this over so I don't lose too much water. And I'm going to connect here. Okay, holding on to that one. This one we're not using just because of the proximity, so don't worry about that. At this point here, I can open up the flow here. I'm hoping I have enough water in here, and I'm going to open up this valve over here. So now my top tank is actually feeding into this area here. And if I disconnect this, notice that I'm getting a little bit of water out of here. I can start to actually prime this pump. Yep, and I've lost a little bit here. I'm just going to keep working that. I'm watching air bubbles up here. And once I'm reasonably happy with that, I'm going to plug this back in because that's not going to stop leaking until I get this above this water level over here. So that's the way we're going to do that. Now, the next thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to add the other pump over here, but then I'm going to have to move this one and get rid of this line. So I'm just going to, again, go back to making a little bit of a mess, and we'll get that figured out. So I'm going to hold on to my fittings, and I'm going to crack this loose. And again, it's very important that you don't make these terribly tight, because if you do, what's going to end up happening is it's going to end up loosening up some of the other fittings and things like that, and then you're going to end up leakages, and then your numbers are going to be wrong, because if it's pumping water out of the system and not necessarily going where it needs to go, then we're going to end up having an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and work on disconnecting this. Sometimes disconnecting these pieces are helpful in order to get enough of a hold on this to break these loose. It doesn't take much for these things to lock up. Worst case scenario, we might have to break out a set of what they call water pump pliers, which are actually locking pliers or slide jaw pliers to be able to grab onto this to crack that loose. But we're going to go ahead and try to get these broken free and set back up where we need to. So I'm doing this a little faster, but by lifting this up here, I can actually keep a lot of the water in this particular system, and that gives me the ability to grab onto this a little differently and try to not lose as much water out of the system. So that's what I'm attempting to do at this particular moment. So I'm going to cross the camera here real quick, and we're going to add some lines. Again, the plan is for you to have a partner to work with. My O-ring is still there. I'm going to start that a little bit, and I'm going to bring this up and ultimately bring this over spot. Oftentimes these hoses will actually get into a situation to where everything will lock in just so. And it's like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. And that's a favorable situation there. That way, you're able to see everything, and there's not a whole lot of strain on the system. All right, this guy we took apart at the beginning. We're going to bring him back. I'm going to set him up right about here. Again, this isn't lining up, but we can make all of this stuff lined up. Big thing is wherever you put these the placement of this stuff, you still want to be able to read your flow meters and different things like that. That's going to be very important. While we're here, before I set anything else up, I am going to use the same unit for this. I want to make sure my wires actually reach. They do in this case, so I can move this out of the way. And now I can go through and start hooking up these other hoses. Again, O-rings there. Got to make sure the O-ring's there, or it's going to be a very interesting surprise when you go to fire this thing up. I'm going to keep that loose. Whoop, going in the wrong spot here. This one actually is going to go up here, so I'm going to take this. Oh, I've actually gotten this hooked up wrong. Got to go out of this and then back into this one right here. That's going to go out of the flow meter and in here. Good. And then out of this pump, because it's going to come into the pump, and it's going to go out of the pump, so that pump has got to go here. We're going to crack this loose. This is going to be a little bit more difficult. We are going to get some water out of this, but it's going to be what it's going to be. Okay, so let's follow this. Again, we're going to have our feed here. It's going in intake of the pump, then it's coming out of the pump, then it's going to intake of the second pump, then it's coming out of the second pump, going through our flow meter so that we can read the amount of volume that we're getting, and then from that, we are going to go into our out. Okay, so our output there. So tighten that up, tighten this up, tighten that, have this, and this. Now, one of the things that is very important for this to pay attention to, and actually, I don't want to say it's important, but something that's pretty cool is as long as this first pump is primed, it will force prime the second pump. So we're in good shape as far as that goes. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. This is going to be our output, and this should be going back into the upper tank there. Making sure that I have water in here, and also too, I'm going to go ahead and put these wires in. We are going to be using the same frequency drive for this. We're not going to be messing around with it. It's going to keep these, it should be keeping these at exactly the same or very, very close to the same RPM. So you're going to get the appropriate pump characteristics there. Now, I'm going to turn this back up to about 60 Hertz, which is our standard here in the United States. Our thing is off. I do have my valve open here and from the tank. So I definitely have a direct line from the water in the tank over to the intake. This is all connected, and then I have water going here. It's blocked off from going down, and it's going back up into our tank. So I have the recirculating circuit that I'm looking for. Now what I can do is I'm going to fire this thing up, and I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to be looking at this flow meter here, because if I have flow there, then that means that everything is moving the way I want to. So let's turn that on. This pump is firing up. I notice here I'm pushing this big bulb of water, or I'm sorry, air and water, and it's going to go in here, and it's going to start pushing this one. And I'm looking, I have 3, 6, 10, 15, okay, 18. So immediately I'm rising, and I know that I have force primed this one. I see that there's no air bubbles in this one, and I am getting a good flow from my tank back into my tank here. We can pay attention to the pressure on these, and it's going to be very interesting where we read the pressure and what it's going to read like, but that's ultimately what this lab is all about.